Thank you for listening to this short talk on understanding digital safety experiences of youth in the US. You can find a QR code and a link to the paper at the end of this presentation. With the increasing integration of technology into the lives of youth, there is a growing concern about youth digital safety. Prior work has explored youth experiences with physical, sexual, and emotional threats, and there have been more recent studies addressing how technology may exacerbate these harms. There's been a call from the HCI community and practitioners to understand the holistic safety experiences youth experience, mapping the various threats, attackers, and contexts in which they occur, the pathways between different threats, and the protective practices youth and the adults who support them utilized within the protective ecosystem. And so now we are going to talk about the experiences youth deal with and the challenges right now in keeping them safe. For this work, we conducted semi-structured interviews and focus groups remotely with a total of 101 participants. 36 participants were youth aged 10 to 17 who represented a broad range of digital safety experiences that range from hate and harassment to sexual violence. 65 were adults who support youth, including parents, teachers, physicians, lawyers, social service advocates, and more. We include more detail about our participants and approach, including important ethical considerations in the paper. There are 5 areas of major findings that surfaced from this work. We found that the diverse digital habits and contextual risk factors of youth led to a complex digital safety landscape. We discussed the importance of understanding the nuanced relationships youth are engaged in. We describe a multidimensional landscape in which attacks are often interconnected, escalating, and migrating across platforms. We discussed the protective practices both adults and youth implemented and identified the challenges and vulnerabilities expressed regarding the effectiveness of these practices. Please read the paper for more details. It became apparent in this research that peer relationships are very nuanced. A common picture has been that certain threats are associated with certain attackers. However, youth described attacks being carried out by a variety of attackers. We highlight a new way to understand these threats. We describe the importance of understanding the nuanced details of the relationship of the attacker to the targeted youth, as it can affect the threats youth face, the tactics attackers use, and the harms youth experience. For instance, intimate partners and peer acquaintances might both pose threats around unwanted sharing of sexual content, but the motivations and tactics are very different. Please refer to the paper for more details. In addition to a wide range of attackers, participants also described a complex digital landscape that includes many more digitally mediated attacks and more migration across platforms than has commonly been reported in the press or prior research. These threats extend beyond cyberbullying and sexual violence, which participants describing dangerous threats such as pressure to commit illegal activities, financial fraud, and to spread misinformation targeted at youth. We also found that adults with close proximity or relationships to youth sometimes pose much more dangerous threats to youth than adult strangers, exploiting proximity and trust in ways that make it difficult for others to notice abuse or for youth to report it. For example, advocates describe sexual abuse perpetrated by known adults, such as family friends or extended family members who knew the youth, sometimes residing in the same home. The attackers would engage in a duplicitous relationship with the youth, connecting with them on social media or using a second phone to communicate with them without other family members knowing. Additionally, youth described experiences with non-consensual intimate imagery, requests for explicit content, sexual abuse and grooming, and sex trafficking. These experiences included the challenges they had in mitigating these attacks. As one youth shared with us, once your nudes get sent out, you're done. It's going to spread. There's no way you can stop it. I've seen videos spread from state to state in literally 5 minutes. It's crazy. So once they're out there, they're out there. Sexual violence often resulted in emotional as well as relational harm to the targeted youth, but could also result in physical harm. Youth also described experiences with financial fraud via online scams and extortion schemes. Examples included being tricked by content creator impersonators sharing scam links, hijacked accounts of friends that sent requests for money, or strangers who would reach out and share a tragic situation the youth could help with. As one youth described, the attacker told me she was a 27-year-old single mother. She told me she needed money for her child. I gave out my bank card and also my online banking code. She wanted me to send money to PayPal. When I stopped, she started harassing and threatening me. Once they realized they had been tricked, youth sought external help from parents, law enforcement, platform support to recover from the attack. Participants also reported attack journeys in which attacks and harms occurred across multiple platforms, varying timescales, and even digital and physical worlds. Attacks also often move from more public to relatively private platforms. Attackers intentionally leveraged multiple platforms, exploiting cases where youth link private accounts to public ones through their profiles or posts to gather knowledge in public forums, only to use it to find and befriend the youth in more private settings. Perpetrators tried to build trust with youth and engage them in both the digital and physical world. These risks were often not apparent to the youth or the adults who support them. We also found that some platforms advertise that they are age appropriate for teens who want to meet other people, but appear to do little to verify identities or moderate activity, opening wide gaps for deceptive attackers to exploit. Reducing illusions of safety is one concrete way to accomplish protective goals of making the digital safety threat landscape clearer. Our findings call out the range of protective practices and stakeholders, parents, advocates, educational, health, and legal professionals that attempt to mitigate the threats. These practices include monitoring and restricting communications, content, platforms, and devices, assessing, discussing, reporting, and learning about risks and seeking support from others. However, these practices are limited by gaps in stakeholders' knowledge of technologies and resources available for gaining that knowledge, as well as gaps in the alignment of interest, communication, and trust between stakeholders. Participants were also quite negative about reporting incidents and concerns to other stakeholders, describing skepticism, fear, and lack of capability. Perhaps the most fundamental lack of coordination we observed is that youth tended to be treated as objects rather than participants in their own safety. Controls were often imposed by schools and parents, especially in the case of schools without consulting youth. There appeared to be insufficient communication around these controls, how they worked, what was monitored, why it was done, which led youth to see them as intrusive or violating their privacy. This in turn led to youth evading these controls. As one youth described, "Screen time doesn't matter. I just reset the time and my parents have no idea." Our recommendations include the need for research and design around the broad set of digitally mediated threats and their associated attackers. This includes more nuanced attention to the nature of the relationship between attackers and youth, moving beyond coarse attacker categories to identify risky relationships, incorporate privacy by design approaches, engage youth in the development of protective practices to provide agency and lessen evasion. There is a need to simplify existing reporting processes across platforms and a great need to provide accessible, actionable educational resources to improve coordination and communication between stakeholders. Thank you for listening to this short talk on understanding digital safety experiences of youth in the U.S. You can check out the paper using the QR code or links on the screen.